Hope everyone is doing good. Welcome back to another live stream, another day, another live stream. Today, of course, as you guys can see, we'll be talking about many interesting topics. We're talking about the LVMH factory in Texas and what's been going on there. We're going to be talking about London Fashion Week in June being cancelled, which is a very big story to talk about, of course, and we'll be talking about the death of luxury sneakers. So, how is everyone doing? Hope everyone is doing good. Um, just see what you guys are saying in the chat, and then we'll jump straight into the topics for the day. Everyone's saying hi, Urbans. Hello, Urbanites. That's funny. Hello, Culture. Also, Culture, by the way, as you can see, I made you a mod. So you don't have to do anything if you don't want to, but you have veto power in the chat. I made a few other people mods. You'll be able to see beside your name when you comment if you're a mod or not. If you see like a spanner or anything, then you have become a mod. You've been given the veto power in the chat. Culture said I've been ignoring it. That's funny. All we need is one time. All it takes is one time for you to change something. That's all we need. You don't have to like monitor things constantly. Culture has been knighted. That's hilarious. But anyway, guys, jumping straight into the topics for today, because I think it'll be great to jump into these topics. There's a lot to talk about. So the first thing I really wanted to talk about is the fact that London Fashion Week is being cancelled, which is insane, by the way, like absolutely insane. But the writing was also on the wall. I've been talking about this for the longest time. I've talked about the fact that London Fashion Week has slowly been declining as time has progressed, especially since Brexit. Brexit made it so that it wasn't really worthwhile for a lot of models to come to London anymore. It didn't make sense for a lot of buyers, international press to come to London. So all of them kind of just skip London now and they all go to Milan and Paris, but specifically Paris. I then talked about how this has led to a lot of fashion designers in London having to all have showrooms in Paris because that's where all the buyers are. And I mean, you have to show your clothing where the buyers are. It's quite funny because it's so different to when you think of fashion in the past, if we're talking about even the story of the Antwerp Six, right? The story of the Antwerp Six, they went to a trade show in London where all the buyers were, and a buyer from Barney's actually, discovered the Antwerp Six, and that's what made the Antwerp Six what they are today. So different, completely different fashion industry now, where most of the buyers aren't even in London anymore, apart from, buyers from the stores that are in London in the first place, like Selfridges and Machine A and stores like that. So the writing has been on the wall for the downfall of London Fashion Week for a very long time now. I think I've kind of seen it slowly decline. I've seen every designer that builds any sort of prominence in the fashion industry, all of them moved to Paris or Milan. We saw that with Samuel Ross's A Cold War moving to Milan. We've seen Martine Rose do shows in Milan. We've seen Kiko Kostadinov do shows in Paris. So a lot of the London designers have moved away for better opportunities. And so this kind of, I think, is something that has culminated into this decision to cancel London Fashion Week in June. So let's read the article. British Fashion Council cancels London Fashion Week June edition. The BFC is focusing on its showroom in Paris in June in lieu of a standalone Fashion Week. So the British Fashion Council has cancelled its June edition of London Fashion Week. Instead, the focus will shift to providing more commercial opportunities for British brands through a London showroom showcase in Paris, which will run from June 26th to the 1st of July. Now, the very interesting thing about that is that this has always been a thing. Like, they've always focused on showrooms for these London designers. So I wonder kind of what's different, or is it just more focus, I guess? And how will that higher level of focus look like? Like, what would that look like? I'm very interested to figure that out. I will be going to Paris Fashion Week in June, so I will be looking into that to see exactly what's going on there because I'm curious. Also, London in general has not really been where business is really done, especially in fashion. London is more seen as the creative hub where designers who want to start their own brands typically are allowed to thrive, where places like Milan and Paris, the focus is more on the big brands. When you go to Paris Fashion Week, everyone's talking about the Balenciaga show, the Courrèges show, the Dior show, the LV show. When you go to Milan, it's all about Prada, it's about Dolce & Gabbana, it's about Versace, these kind of brands. So it's very different in London. In London, we do have big brands like Burberry, but the focus tends to be on the Simone Rochers and the Erdem's and these kind of brands. And it's always been that creative hub that harnesses the creative talent of younger designers and emerging talent. And Paris and Milan has more just been big business. So it's always been that way. So when they say they're moving to Paris to focus on the showrooms, I'm curious because that's kind of always been a thing anyway. It's always been a thing there. But reading on, the BFC's outgoing CEO, Caroline Rush, hopes the showroom will provide an opportunity for designers to generate sales and develop their relationships with international media outside of the show environment, reinforcing our commitment to providing vital commercial opportunities for British designers. And that's such a good point, although I don't know if it's going to build the designers the way they think it will, because this international press, a lot of it is predicated around the runway shows, not so much the showrooms. When I look at people's content around Fashion Week, it tends to be a lot of runway reviews, backstage kind of content. People don't really go to showrooms and film and talk to people at the showrooms. People should. I think people should, because it's more slower paced than the showroom, and actually you have more time to talk to the team and they can really run you through all the garments one by one. But for some reason, maybe brands don't focus their strategy on that. But a lot of the content and a lot of the focus on the press is not around showrooms. Like, you don't see ID magazine and Vogue writing about what's going on in brand showrooms. It's mainly runway reviews, right? Especially during Fashion Week. So once again, I'll be curious to see exactly how they cover that, how exactly they're going to get people to the showrooms and to make really engaging content, and how they're going to get the press to write about the clothes. I'm curious to see how they're going to do that. But reading on, the BFC reintroduced its Paris showroom in September 2024 for SS25 after a hiatus following January 2023. Since September, the BFC has been rethinking the commercial support for the region's emerging and independent brands. In February, for Autumn/Winter 25, the BFC introduced the pop-up London Fashion Week shop on Regent Street, which featured brands including Ahluwalia, Nicholas Daley and Saul Nash, and was open to the public. The London Fashion Week June edition was initially launched with a menswear focus as London Collections Men. Yeah, that was literally the London Collections Men is what became London Fashion Week Men's in London. Okay, they even said it, which was then rebranded to London Fashion Week Men's in 2017. In its heyday, exciting brands such as Alexander McQueen, J.W. Anderson, Wales Bunner, and Craig Green attracted an engaged international audience. In June 2020, the event turned co-ed as show formats began shifting that way more broadly and was presented digitally during the 2020 and 2021 COVID seasons. So, apart from obviously a lot of people saying that their garments are unisex and therefore a lot of the coverage of shows became co-ed, I think part of the reason why shows became co-ed, once again, was because there was less press coming, and it just didn't make sense to have all the different separate fashion weeks. I don't think it was worthwhile for the brands or for the BFC, to be very honest. So that's another reason why. I don't think it was just because people started to say, well, I make menswear and womenswear anyway, it's unisex, so I might as well show co-ed. I think there's more at play than that, to be honest. But reading on, after the pandemic, the event returned with a smaller but still buzzy edition in 2022, featuring shows from exciting newcomers at the time, such as Ahluwalia, Labrum London, and Robin Lynch, as well as an off-schedule show from Martine Rose. The June 2020 schedule shrunk considerably, featuring a handful of presentations from Saul Nash, SMR Days, and Kasimi Rising. And in 2024, the BFC trialed a new format centered around an exhibition of London design at the Institute of Contemporary Art, as well as events celebrating the cultures that have impacted London's menswear scene. There were a few shows: Denzel Patrick, Charles Jeffrey Loverboy, and Kasimi, and a presentation from Harry. As the June edition shrunk, exposure dwindled, leaving many brands feeling it was no longer commercially viable to show in London during the week, which is something I've definitely alluded to multiple times, that London Fashion Week was almost becoming not worthwhile for a lot of these brands, which is why they go to Paris and do the showrooms in the first place. I literally, because showing is actually very expensive unless you're, funded in London. There are many people that could fund you. Some people are funded by the BFC, like if you're a BFC scholar or, you're part of BFC New Gen, or you could be funded by Fashion East if you're part of Fashion East. But if you're not funded by one of these initiatives, it's really expensive, and you have to do the maths. Like, if there's no international press, really, the international buyers aren't coming, why would you spend all this money to show in London when you can just not show, but instead have a showroom and put all of your budget into having this like really good showroom in Paris? It didn't really make any sense. It started to just not make any sense, to be honest. But reading on, to tackle this, the BFC says the June showroom will make menswear its focus, and that it plans to collaborate with buyers and press both locally and internationally through a digital-first approach. By scaling back to more targeted programs this June in London and Paris, we aim to create strong foundations to amplify the message of our brilliant British menswear business, says Rush. We recognise the challenges the sector faces both in the UK and globally, and remain committed to amplifying the voices of British menswear designers as they navigate an ever-changing fashion landscape, and will continue to adapt and find ways to platform our brilliant British menswear business. And I think something I've always appreciated about, the British brands is that there really is a space to allow or give a voice to emerging talent. And that's something I've always loved about London and appreciated about it. But you have to make things commercially viable. And for a lot of brands, showing, especially in a place where the press coverage is not there, the media is not there, it just didn't make any sense to continue spending all that money investing in London Fashion Week. So I think they've done the right thing. I think they've actually done right by the brands. Yes, it's not good that, I live in London, I'm from London. It's quite sad that these things are slowing down. But I care about the well-being of these designers. Once again, fashion is a really difficult business. And I think they've made the right decision focusing on the showrooms in Paris, to be very honest. And I do appreciate, of course, we have the Simone Rocha, her latest collection on the screen. I appreciate designers like Simone Rocha, who is big enough now, prominent enough to where she could show elsewhere, but she's always decided to be a mainstay of London Fashion Week, even when so many other designers have kind of jumped ship. So that's something I do appreciate from Simone Rocha. And of course, Simone Rocha's brand is obviously a very well-loved brand across the whole of the UK, to be honest, and beyond. David said, honestly, showrooms are a better way to interact with clothing, in my opinion. It's more tactile. I totally agree. I just think in terms of press coverage, it isn't there when it comes to the showrooms. That's all. That's all. You've even lost Paul Smith, who's moving the show to Milan. Yeah, many brands, many brands have left London to show, to be honest. So many. And rightfully so. It makes sense. It makes all the sense in the world. I adore Russia. I adore Simone Russia too. Yes, Erdem. Also, that's very true. He'll always show in London, which is because Erdem does really good business. So Erdem could definitely show elsewhere, like in Milan Fashion Week or in Paris, actually. But they've decided to be mainstays of the London scene. I really do appreciate that. I really, really do. So yeah, that's kind of the update on London Fashion Week, and those are my quick thoughts on where London Fashion Week stands. I really would love to see, and I'm going to report back as to how exactly they implement all of these things during Paris Fashion Week. So that will be a very interesting thing to think about when it happens. But anyway, moving on to the next story. A very, very interesting story as we continue to talk about, factories in the US, the Trump tariffs, and all those kind of things. And we've been having discussions around the ability to create a lot of manufacturing infrastructure in the US and how easy it is to do that. And so that's why I thought this story was really interesting, because as many of you know, not that long ago actually, LVMH, there are those pictures with Bernard Arnault and Donald Trump shaking hands when he built his factory in Texas where they were making Louis Vuitton bags. But now a lot of reports are coming out saying that LVMH's Louis Vuitton factory in Texas is actually the worst performing factory that they run globally. And so when we have these conversations around, in the US, they have the infrastructure and they have the staff and the skills to create the kind of manufacturing that you see across the world in countries that specialize in these things, in garment manufacturing, whether we're talking about Vietnam or we're talking about China, Turkey, Portugal, France, Italy, it goes on and on and on. You tend to find that, that isn't always the case. Someone is saying this is a New York Post. It's actually a Reuters article. As you can see, it even says by Reuters. It was just easier for me to open the New York Post article without it being blocked behind a paywall. But the story is actually via Reuters. It's not via the New York Post. Just in case you didn't know, it's actually via Reuters. But anyway, reading on. Let me just sort this out quickly. Okay. I don't know why that full screened. We definitely don't want that to full screen. That's beside the point. But yeah, reading on. So 6 years ago, LVMH's billionaire CEO Bernard Arnault and President Donald Trump cut the blue ribbon on a factory in rural Texas. As we all know, the site has consistently ranked amongst the worst performing for Louis Vuitton globally, significantly underperforming other facilities, according to 3 former Louis Vuitton workers and a senior industry source who cited internal rankings shared with staff, which is absolutely insane, right? Absolutely insane that their New York plant is performing the worst globally. You need to remember, LVMH produces in so many countries because they have so many factories, third party and, created by them themselves. So for it to be the worst one, I think it says a lot about how difficult it is to create this sort of infrastructure in an efficient way in the US. I think it says a lot, but let's read on. And that, of course, is the picture of Bernard Arnault and Donald Trump. Bernard Arnault, of course, was at Donald Trump's inauguration as well. So they tend to be on good terms. So we'll see how long that lasts. But for now, it should be that they are on good terms for now. We're reading on. The plant's problems, which haven't previously been reported, highlight the challenges for LVMH as it attempts to build its production footprint in the US to avoid Trump's threatened tariffs on European-made goods. The ramp-up was harder than we thought it would be. That's true. Ludovic Pochard, Louis Vuitton's industrial director, said in an interview on Friday in response to detailed questions about Reuters' findings. Now, this is really interesting because, once again, a lot of people like to act like this infrastructure is going to be able to be created overnight. You literally have Louis Vuitton's industrial director who said that the ramp up was harder than they thought it would be. And this is a factory, mind you, this is a factory that they finalized the building of years ago. So they have had years to actually try and figure out the most efficient way to do it. And this report is now coming out in 2025 showing that, they're having issues. So they had so much time to work out the kinks with their manufacturing, and it's still not good. So this idea that, we're just going to impose tariffs on everyone overnight and all the factories are going to be built and it's going to be just as efficient is nonsensical. And I've been saying it's nonsensical from the start. People, constantly argue with me, and I don't know why, because it's common sense. And we have the reports to back all of this up, and we'll continue to have the reports to back all of this up. But reading on, The Texas site, situated on a 250-acre ranch, has struggled due to a lack of skilled leather workers able to produce at the brand's quality standards, the three former workers told Reuters. So, once again, they have had years to train the staff and they still can't find enough skilled workers. So, how exactly are they planning on, ramping up the production in the US when with the little, luxury production hubs they have, they are struggling themselves to find workers that are skilled enough to create their leather bags to the quality and to the standard that they need it at. I don't know how they expect that to happen. Reading on, it took them years to start making the simple pockets of the Neverfull handbag. One source familiar with operations at the plant said, referring to the classic Louis Vuitton shoulder bag. Errors made during the cutting, preparation, and assembly process led to the waste of as many as 40% of the leather hides. Oh my God, 40% is insane. That is insane. 40% of the leather hides were going to waste. That is insane. I really want to know what they do with all of those leather hides that they get rid of. I hope they find a use for it, maybe by using those to make accessories and stuff. Because I recently visited the Celine factory, which is also an LVMH brand, and they use a lot of their their like leather scraps and stuff to make accessories and belts and stuff like that. So I hope Louis Vuitton has a good way of using this waste, because that is so much waste. 40% is really, really insane. Like 40% is wild. But reading on, industry-wide, typical waste rates for leather goods are generally 20%, a senior industry source said. So their waste is double the industry standard. Insane. Several former employees who spoke to Reuters described the high-pressure environment. To boost production numbers, supervisors routinely turned a blind eye towards methods to conceal defects and in some cases encouraged them, 4 former employees told Reuters. And I mean, that doesn't surprise me, that they are, trying to turn a blind eye so that they can meet production standards, especially when production standards are high, because once again, you cannot compare it to Italy or France, where in Italy and France, they have been producing luxury bags since like last century. So they have been able to fine tune all the kinks in the, production process for years, like 30, 40 years, sometimes even longer for a lot of these brands. So you are not just going to go to a new region and be able to, achieve that same level of output that quickly. It's just not going to happen. And you can see that's the case based on exactly what they are saying in this report. But reading on, Pouchard acknowledged there had been such cases in the past, but the issue had been resolved. This dates back to 2018 and one particular manager who isn't part of the company anymore, he said. Poorly crafted handbags deemed unfit for sale are shredded on site and carted away in trucks for incineration. 2 of the sources with knowledge of the firm's supply chain said. Okay, so that's a problem. That's a big problem. So what they do is they shred the bags and incinerate them. That is not good. That is not great. That's not great at all. That is not what I wanted to read. I wanted to read that they use the waste and use it for accessories and stuff like that. So they're telling me that the 40% of wasted leather hides get incinerated. Oh my gosh, where are the sustainability journalists and sustainability activists talking about this? Of course, this report is very new, but I'd like to see more sustainability advocates talk about this because, wow, shredded on site and carted away in trucks for incineration. That still happens in 2025. That is not good. That is not good. Reading on, a former production supervisor who often traveled to the site and said Louis Vuitton mostly used the Texas plant for less sophisticated handbag models, producing its most expensive products elsewhere. No surprises there because the expertise and the skill set is not in the US. So it makes sense why they would produce, their most basic bags in the US. And even though they are producing their most basic bags in the US, they still have the worst performance and the most waste out of all their factories worldwide. Insane. Pouchard, Louis Vuitton's industrial director, said the company was being patient with a young factory. Any bag that goes out of it must be a Louis Vuitton bag. We make sure it meets exactly the same quality, he said. I'm not aware of any kinds of issues suggesting the quality coming from Texas is any different from that coming from Europe. Perched behind a hill, the handbag maker's two production facilities were built on grounds near grazing cattle and a gas well. Louis Vuitton named the site Rochambeau in tribute to a French general who fought in the Revolutionary War. Workers at the site make components and entire models of Louis Vuitton handbags like Felice pochettes and Métis bags with Made in USA tags inside. The items sell for around $1,500 and $3,000 at high-end boutiques. LVMH declined to comment when asked which handbag models are fully or partially made in Texas, but former workers interviewed by Reuters mentioned the Carryall, the Keepall, the Métis, the Felice, and the Neverfull handbag lines among the plant's products. In its marketing material, Louis Vuitton says its handbags, typically made at French, Spanish, or Italian leather ateliers by artisans known as petites mains, are assembled using a process that it has perfected since the mid-19th century. So I'm going to call cap on this only because I'm going to call cap on this for two reasons. The first reason, we have seen so many reports of LVMH working with third-party manufacturers that LVMH claims they don't know what's going on there. So that's the first thing. Second of all, even though they have perfected their assembly line since the 19th century, I do agree that they probably had. The expertise is there. However, the workers are not in the US. So there are generations of people in Italy and in France that have been making leather bags, like literally families of generations that have this craftsmanship and expertise. That does not exist in the US. So that's why they're struggling to find enough skilled workers, because there isn't, that same history of that same craftsmanship in the US the same way that there is in the likes of Italy or France. So even if they have the right process, they don't have the skilled workers. So them trying to make this argument that there's no issue, I'm going to call big cap on that. I think that's cap. But reading on, after cutting canvas and leather using hand tools and laser cutting machines, they stitch pieces together using industrial sewing machines. So I'm going to call cap on this because I recently visited the Celine factory, which is also an LVMH brand. And in the Celine factory, they told me that it takes workers approximately 4 to 5 years of training before they are allowed to work on every aspect of the creation of most of the Celine bags. So if we're going to take that understanding, how long has the LVMH, Louis Vuitton factory been in Texas? And that tells you that there's absolutely no way they could possibly have enough skilled workers at that factory, just based on having to train workers for up to 5 years for them to comfortably work on every aspect of the creation of each bag. So big cap, I'm going to call big cap on that. Foul on the play, guys. But reading on, workers at the Texas facility, which includes dedicated floors for cutting and for assembly, as well as a warehouse, were initially paid $13 per hour. As of 2024, base pay for a leather worker position at the plant was $17 per hour, according to two people who recently applied for positions. The minimum wage in Texas is $7.25 an hour. A former leather worker who arrived as a migrant in the US some years before said she felt proud when she was hired by a prestigious French brand, but said some workers struggled to meet the brand's quality standards and production targets. We are under a lot of pressure to make the daily goals, said the former worker, who left the factory at the end of 2019. Another person who worked at the facility until 2023 said she cut corners, like using a hot pin to melt canvas and leather to conceal imperfections in a particularly difficult piece called the Vendome Opera bag. Another former leather worker said they'd seen multiple people melt material to hide holes or other imperfections in stitching. And that's insane because, once again, going to Celine, talking about the Celine factory, because I is in my mind because I went there recently. But Celine, you can't compare Louis Vuitton to Celine because Celine quality is way better than LV. It's not even close. But the quality control at Celine is insane. Like, they inspect the leather hides constantly at every stage to make sure that there aren't like imperfections or there isn't damage. So based on what I saw, at least, looking at the way that Celine manufactures things, they would be able to tell if someone was cutting corners and just like burning things to kind of smoothen the surfaces and stuff like that. Because they studied like the fabrics to make sure it's a-okay. So that shows that there's damn near zero quality control at these plants in Texas, that people are just like, burning the surface to smoothen it out. And these things are kind of going unchecked until these reports are being done. So that's crazy. Quality control is seriously lacking there. Seriously lacking there. But reading on, Damien Verbrig, Louis Vuitton's international manufacturing director, conceded some at the Texas plant had chosen to change jobs or leave because of its stringent quality requirements. I'm going to call cap on that. Of course, the manufacturing director would say that they have stringent quality requirements, but that doesn't seem to be the case based on the reports we're reading and the accounts of people that used to work there. But let's see what what they say in their quote. So they said, let's see. There are artisans that we hire, who we train, and who, after several weeks or months, realize, in light of the expectations, the level of detail that is required, they would rather work in other fields like logistics, he said. Some people choose to leave us because it's true that it's a job that requires a lot of savoir-faire. 3 former workers at the plant said that they received between 2 and 5 weeks of training. So once again, guys, this is why I called cap immediately, because I literally just visited a factory by an LVMH brand, which was the Celine in that case. You cannot train someone within 2 to 5 weeks. 2 to 5 weeks is not enough for, workers to be skilled enough to work on these bags. Any person that works in the industry, works in production, works in any sort of factory, works in manufacturing, will tell you that, 2 and 5 weeks of training is nowhere even remotely closely long enough to be able to allow them to even go close to these bags. So once again, absolutely ludicrous. Absolutely ludicrous. But let's read on. A current Louis Vuitton employee in France said receiving just a few weeks of training wasn't unusual, as most learning happens on the production line supervised by more experienced craftspeople. That's not true. That's literally not true. Knowledge of sewing on leather/canvas is a plus, but not required. We offer comprehensive training, the company said in a job posting for artisan positions in Alvarado, published on its website in January. So I agree with this partially, right? You don't necessarily need like knowledge of sewing on leather or canvas because they offer comprehensive training. But once again, the comprehensive training is more than 5 weeks. It's not 5 weeks long. 5 weeks is not long enough to teach someone how to effectively sew a Louis Vuitton bag. It just doesn't make sense. Like, that doesn't make any sense. But reading on, Verbrig said training in Texas is exactly the same program we have in all our workshops. That is 6 weeks on the training line, where new artisans do nothing but learn basic operations and skills before going on to train on the assembly line. There, he said, they are accompanied by continuously mentored by trainers. So that's just not true, because if you allow someone who's only been trained for 6 weeks to actually start working on the bags, it will lead to a lot of waste because they will make a lot of mistakes. And with a lot of these luxury brands, if you make the slightest mistake, they can't put that bag into production anymore. So they have to get rid of it or try to salvage the rest of the leather and use that for accessories. That's definitely the case in Celine, which is why how it works in the Celine factory is normally they teach you how to do only one specific process of making the bag. And even that process takes longer than 6 weeks. After some of these, so I think they said it's close to a year before you're even allowed to start working on the bags. So you just practice and practice. And then after that year is only enough for you to work on like a specific part of the process. And then the next year, as time progresses, they then teach you each different stage of making that bag and making different bags. And then by the end of like 4 to 5 years, that's when you now have the skills to make a bag from beginning to end. So you can work on any part, of the production of each bag, right? That's how it works, literally how it works. So this idea that, you just trained for 6 weeks and then you start working on the bags and you're just supervised by someone is just not true. And I say this as someone that literally visited a factory run by an LVMH brand less than 2 months ago. So no, I don't agree with that. But reading on, LVMH got a host of tax breaks and incentives from Johnson County, including a 10-year, 75% property tax cut, promising the company an estimated $29 million in savings. We look forward to serving this exceptional company, wrote the county's top executive, Roger Harmon, in 2017 correspondence seen by Reuters. In its 2017 application letter for tax abatement, obtained by Reuters through records request, LVMH said it was aiming to hire 500 people within the first 5 years of the plan. At the ribbon-cutting ceremony in 2019, Arnault said, "We will create approximately 1,000 high-skilled jobs here at the Rochambeau over the next 5 years." 3 former staffers, however, said headcount stood at just under 300 workers in February 2025, a figure Verbride confirmed. The White House did not respond to Reuters' request for comment. Pochard said initial recruitment difficulties were largely due to the COVID-19 pandemic and the lockdown that followed, adding that a decline in local demand also played a role. Despite the problems, LVMH is planning to move even more jobs to Texas. LVMH said in its 2017 filing that its first Texas production facility would cost around $30 million. Now, let's actually pause there for a second to talk about stuff that they said. So they said that they would have 500 workers. Staffers have said that the headcount is actually closer to 300 workers as at February 2025, which is hilarious because if they're having all these issues hiring staff in one plant, how exactly are they going to move all of this production from China and Italy and, Vietnam and all this stuff all into the US? I just really want to know how exactly they're going to do that. I just don't understand how that's possible, to be honest. I just don't see. I'm curious to know what they can even teach in 2 weeks. Yeah, I need to figure that out too. They're claiming that they train people in 2 to 5 weeks. That is literally Looney Tunes behavior. Kind of what Art is saying. Yeah, 2 to 5 weeks is Looney Tune crazy. Facts. Doesn't even make any sense. I'm surprised that a lot of LV representatives say stuff like this with their chest when anyone that works in the industry knows that all of that doesn't make sense. But obviously they're saying that to cover their backs, as anyone that works for a company will. But it's just too ridiculous. Like, no one's going to believe that. No one is believing that. Literally no one is believing that. But let's read the last part of the article. A second filing from 2022 to local authorities put the cost of its second workshop completed last year at $23.5 million. At a town hall last fall, workers at one of the 2 California production sites were told that it would close 2028 and that they could move to Texas or quit, according to a former employee who was present. Pochard confirmed the town hall and said Louis Vuitton intended to streamline its California operations and transfer more skilled artisans to Texas, with so far limited success. Its executives, he said, underestimated the fact that Texas is far away from California. So that really is what's going on in terms of the LVMH Texas manufacturing issues. And I think it was very important to talk about because there's all this conversation around we should move manufacturing to the US without any understanding of how difficult it is to actually bring this manufacturing to the US. It's possible, but it's going to take way longer than people think, and it's not going to be as advantageous as a lot of people think. So that's why I wanted to cover this story. I think it's very interesting. Before I move on to the next topic, let me see what you guys are saying in the chat. I'm very, very curious. Also, Dami, if you want to hop in the live and give your thoughts, I'll share the link in the description. So yeah, we'll see. They don't know the distance from Cali to Texas. I guess they don't have access to a map, which is very, very odd, isn't it? Clearly, I don't know how they didn't know how far California is from Texas when you can literally just Google that, but each to their own. Each to their own. Let's say, just took a look at the Celine bag since you speak. Um, so what fondly of the quality, I think you meant to say. Sad to see all of them look so basic. The logo hardware looks bad. It isn't bad. If you see the Celine hardware in person, it's actually really, really good. It might maybe online it looks bad, but in person it's really good. In terms of like, the designs being basic, I think it depends on what bag you're talking about. Also, I'm not a Celine spokesperson, by the way, so don't think of me like that. However, that part of the reason why they keep it simple in a lot of the bags is it allows them, or it makes it easier for them to, kind of keep control and take control over the quality of the production of the bags, to be honest. But yeah, my experience with Celine, and I've been saying this for years, even before I went to the factory or whatever, is that their quality of garments, especially ready to wear, oh my gosh, is way better than most brands, especially luxury brands and fashion. But yeah, let me see. Okay, it seems like you guys don't have much more to say about the LVMH story. Courtesy of Reuters. Of course, we're looking at it via the New York Post, but this is actually a Reuters article, as I've mentioned before. Hello, Dami. How are you? Hello,
Give
can you
me a
hear me?
second, fam. I can't seem to see you on the actual
Strange.
one. Wait, give me a sec. Oh yeah, there we
I
go.
can I
Yes,
can hear you though.
I'm hearing you on StreamYard. I was hearing you on YouTube instead. I don't know why. But
Okay.
good evening. Good evening. Yeah, it's quite late, but shout out to everybody involved. Uh, which particular story were you just covering?
So LVMH having issues with their production plant in Texas. Their Louis Vuitton
Oh,
production plant in Texas.
yes, 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 yes. Interesting, interesting. I was otherwise indisposed. Which points did you actually point out when you were talking about this?
So I was really just talking about the fact that I think people are oversimplifying how easy it's going to be to move manufacturing from all the different countries that Trump has imposed heavy tariffs on to the US, because that's kind of the point of it. That's been the message that, we need to bring back American jobs, American industry, American production, and stuff like that. But I think people are underestimating the kind of training that needs to go into, creating skilled workers that can actually produce these things
Mm.
to the quality that is required, and that's why LVMH is having so many issues.
I think most of the smart minds said, it's not totally a bad idea, but that type of stuff takes like 20 years.
Yep.
13 years at least, and you do a slow crawl rather than doing what you're doing. But just based on Trump's temperament, or Big T's temperament, I'm gonna start calling him Big T from now on because
Big
of the
T.
accent. But yeah, or the Orange Man, it doesn't really matter. But Big T's temperament, it's that just one of those things where at this present moment in time, he's going to do whatever he wants because he has a consortium of people around him that will allow him to do whatever he wants. Uh, Remember the inauguration when he had all of the billionaires? Like, it was
Yeah,
probably
including
the
Bernard
most
Arnault.
powerful stage. Yeah, exactly. This is where I'm going to, including it's probably the most powerful stage that we've ever seen in this decade, as in the most powerful billionaires, not even like oligarchs or politicians or anything, just richest people in the world standing right
Yeah.
beside him. And then, these things, LVMH, I guess Bernard thought it wasn't going to necessarily affect him, but, we have this story here. This way I'm going to land my plane. And yeah, I'm going to let you lead from now on. But that's just
No,
my
I just wanted to know what your thoughts are, especially because like they're struggling to find enough skilled workers, first of all, which they said has been one of their biggest issues. They're also saying that they can't get people long enough, so people join, realize kind of what's required in terms of how meticulous they have to be when making these bags, and then they just quit.
yeah.
Um, and so that's like going to be a big issue that they're going to face, like moving forward for
Okay.
sure.
I think not to cut you off, but I think it's a really really good point to make that Italy and Paris breeds a type of behavior where people slow down and want to make things.
Hmm.
And just like there are these not just governmental incentives, but social incentives as well that make people want to be bag makers.
It's
Just
also
like
it's a
uh,
culture. Like, bro,
yeah, there we go. Yeah.
when I visited the Celine factory in Italy, people were so prideful of the fact that they were part of the process and the savoir faire, and they were actually quite passionate about it. Like when I talked about people that worked in a factory, they were like, "Yeah, I love the fact that I'm part of this like big process and we all work together to make these." But there's like a pride there
Mm.
because of kind of how it's been passed down. Like the understanding of doing these things has been passed down from generation to generation. There's a pride in the luxury industry as a whole because a lot of French people feel like it's one of their biggest industries, so they take pride in it. Same thing with Italians. So there's a pride behind like helping these industries to keep running and keeping these industries flowing in the country, and that pride doesn't necessarily follow through in the US. And even though, like, let's say some of these people in the factories aren't really well paid, um, like in terms of they're not rich, right? Which will be the same case in like the Texas factory in the US. But for some reason, there still tends to be this culture and pride around crafting these things. I don't think is in the US.
Yeah, one thing is that it's not one of those things where you have to be rich, and this is part of the societal, like you're saying, culture, because it's more than that. It's ingrained in the social system. The
Hmm.
way Parisians take breaks from work. And like when we were like, because of Britain and we're from London, so we have the finance sector, and we're like, oh, go, 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 go. But then Parisians have a totally different ethic in corporate. Like corporate Parisians have a different ethic as
Hmm.
opposed to British ones. Whereas like we're possibly in the middle of like between America and somewhere along the Atlantic space. But in terms of the way that people work in not just the rural areas, but even in the cities, the major fashion hubs that are not in England or America is just different. Like they're slower, and their lives don't necessarily concern the need to become six-figure, seven-figure earners
Hmm.
to feel good about themselves and their livelihood, because the work and the craftsmanship just happens to be more important sometimes, because they are craftsmen, they're craftspeople. They're not just people that are out there getting a paycheck. It's
Hmm.
not a grind, like you were saying, and like the way that they were they would go on these poetic almost soliloquies about the way they enjoy working. People, you don't get that here, you don't get that in America. That's not the
Hmm.
way that people think about their work. Only on the highest level that people actually say that. And you know of course you're gonna pretend or act as if you're you know fulfilled when you're earning millions and millions, but then we do have those people that unalive themselves and they're billionaires or millionaires. So yeah.
I think it's possible to like do things where you're going to earn less money, but you're passionate about it. It's kind of like, for example, I love talking about fashion. So I would rather, review a runaway show than talk about something else that might maybe get more views and then therefore make me more money, if that makes sense. Um, so
Mm.
I think it just depends, because like if I was to observe like fashion YouTube and see like what makes the most money, it's probably making like trend videos, like spring, summer trends, autumn, winter trends, 2025 trends, and just like spamming those videos. I could spam those and get views, but I'm just not passionate about stuff like that. So I'd rather make less money doing what I'm more passionate about. And I guess you can use that understanding to like a lot of people that in Italy or France that take pride in kind of what they produce. It's not really about money. It's they see it as, so long as I can make a living doing this, if I enjoy this, this is what I enjoy. So I think that pride and passion is something that hasn't followed through to the US the same way it is in Europe for
Yeah,
sure.
I would argue, when has it ever been in the US for real?
I think
Like,
I think in the US there's a pride for things, maybe just not luxury goods. I think there's a
what
pride.
I'm talking about in work, in labor. There's a pride in exploitation. Like, I want to be so totally honest about this. The
Yeah.
US, like, especially from my concerned effort to understand history, the US from the beginning, from the make, let's just start in making railroads. Yeah, I'm not even gonna go to the place that everybody usually goes. Let's just go to the railroads. Those things, especially the steel mills and the oil wells and everything like that, that was based on exploitative labor of like just normal everyday Americans, and then obviously Great Depression, so on and so forth.
Yeah, Jennifer,
But
this is what I was going to mention. The first thing when I think of US pride is the automotive industry. Like the
yeah,
car labor, I think Americans are really passionate and prideful
about
about
cars.
the
Okay,
cars
this
and
I think well, not just think, I believe, right? Just based on the history, like from over 100 years ago, I wouldn't necessarily say that they were prideful in the way that they were thinking they were cross people in the earlier, like the turn of the centuries, in my opinion. Anyways,
no, I think the people that used to produce the cars were pride. Like from what I've seen, because I'm quite like into like cars, obviously. So like I follow like the history of cars in the US and stuff. I think they were prideful. They were very prideful. Also, it was because like it's kind
wait,
of
in
like
which
a
decade? In which decade? Let me
in
check.
most decades actually, because how it's always been seen by Americans is that they want to prove that they make the best cars and they make better cars than the Japanese and then the Germans specifically. um so that's why they're always like,
They want to prove they make better cars than the Japanese and the Germans.
I don't think they do, but
No,
that's kind of where their pride
but
comes
no,
from.
but this stuff. This is the interesting thing about this, right? Okay, let's put pride to the side, as we always should do. But in terms of like quality American vehicles, yeah, Americans have been great craftspeople throughout the centuries, right? Um, but then when we have Ferrari and all of the other engine makers, right? Because like, I guess my point was still in exploitation. It was, they had to, like, when Americans had their massive boom in the automotive industry, it was during the war. It was during the Great
Hmm.
War. So like, are we really saying that they were proud? What were they necessarily prideful in when it was time to innovate during the Great War? It wasn't based on, oh, we need to make the best vehicles. It was, we're making unaliving machines.
No, it was about making the best vehicles. That's why like even companies like Ford especially hold like a
Mhm.
certain like
Okay.
there's like a pro-American sentiment to driving a Ford. And I think it comes out of that pride that I'm talking about, the Americans have of
I love an F-150 more than the next guy, but the same way, like, I don't think the innovation was necessarily based
yeah.
on wanting to make the best truck per se. But yeah, that's just my
Yeah,
take.
I think the American pride is definitely there. I just think it's less so there now, which is why in a manufacturing space, if you're trying to bring all this manufacturing to the US, it might be difficult because people probably won't want to do those jobs, especially if like the wages don't make sense for most people, right? Because it's really, really toiling, laboring work. And if the wages don't make sense, it's like, why would anyone in the US want to do that?
Honestly, yeah, no, I understand the pride in like the 80s 100%, especially when it was Ford GM Chrysler in Detroit, Michigan, and everything like that. But then we saw what happened there in the turn of the millennium, right? Where
Hmm.
all of those jobs got like taken out and shipped off to another space. Like
Yeah.
Japan wants to make things, Germany wants to make things, right? And then of
Yeah.
course,
Also,
mm,
Steve Van Gogh. So that's what I was saying. So in fashion specifically, the pride certainly isn't there for the most part, which is why we're talking about LVMH having a problem. Obviously, we're having a wider conversation around like, is there a this prideful sentiment across the whole of the US? But in terms of clothing, I don't think it's there the same way that it was once.
wait, there
For
was a pride
sure.
in clothes as well.
Yeah, like during the time of like the Battle of Versailles and stuff, there was like this because there was this
Okay.
sentiment of the fact that the French think that they're so good, and we brought American designers and we caught them by storm. So around when the Battle of Versailles
You know
happened,
what? I take
there
back
was
what I said. You're absolutely right. They
yeah
were
around
pride.
around the
They
time
were
that the battle of
prideful.
yeah
That
around the
pride is
time
going to
that the
take you
Battle of
far.
Versailles happened, people wanted to be designers and they wanted to like stick it to the French and stuff. But I don't think that has slowed down. So I don't think it's the same. There's that same pride that there was in American
Yeah,
designers that there was from back then.
like Americans are great competitors. This is what I love about Americans, right? But then when they're not trying to compete, they're competing against each other. What is the nature of it all? What's the nature
Yeah,
of the beast? And just to go back to the LVMH thing, um, I don't necessarily think that Texas would be the space to make these types of leather goods, because I've seen people that are working in Texas and what's that place? Oklahoma, all of these places, right? They make horse
right.
saddles, they make cowboy boots. You know, I know people that even make prom dresses, like cotillion dresses, all of these other things, right? So they do actually have a nest,
Yeah,
like they have craftspeople in these spaces. But then when we're talking about luxury leather goods, handbags, I think those are like that's just a different
yeah. So
space. That's a
Jennifer,
different
this is really a really fascinating point you brought up about like outsourcing because, like Jennifer said, I repeat, outsourcing. So the interesting thing about this is, once again, I think the reason why a lot of these things are outsourced comes to the lack of pride. Because I'll tell you why. So in Japan, a lot of machines, especially the really old ones that they use, actually come from the US. Um, a lot of machines that they use to make the denim in Japan that we love and we're like, oh my God, this is so amazing. A lot of that machinery was actually made in the US. So the funny thing is that the Japanese see more value in these American machines than Americans do themselves. And Japanese producers are more passionate about using this like old machinery than Americans are themselves. And that I think is part of the pride, because it's almost like pride makes you care about things and that makes you want to keep things going. The same way that Japanese really strongly care about these things and want to keep these production processes going. Um, so I think that's kind of down to the pride we're talking about. I think the reason why a lot of these things are outsourced is because maybe the Americans don't deem it as profitable enough, and so they're not passionate about it. So they start outsourcing it everywhere, and then you have other countries that jump in, like Japan, and take the mantle from the Americans.
Yeah, I wanted to ask a question and I legit forgot it because I was so engrossed in your point. Um the bags, what they were
Hmm.
making, right, in Texas, what what was the reason? Like what was the reason for them making the bags in Texas? Did they say in the thing?
I think it's a tax thing because that's why they have productions in California and they're like closing those down and then moving everything to Texas. So it's probably going to be because of tax.
Yeah, because I know they do make like they make Audis in Cali, right? Like so as in like they have designers, they have people that design in Cali, and they have people that design. I think they do have a base in Miami as well. But yeah, they're There are people that make cars and all of these other
Yeah,
things in
Texas
America.
does give a lot of tax breaks, which is why they're,
So what in
like I said,
particular
it's
though?
tax. Oh, just
Like,
tax in general in
are we talking about corporation tax? Are we talking
across the
about
board, across the
tax?
board. I even think, guys, correct me if I'm wrong, Americans in the chat, but isn't income tax in Texas lower than most other states? Like I know Texas is like really good for like taxes, like lower than most places. That's why I remember there was a point in time when I think Joe Rogan moved to Texas, and like so many other prominent figures in the US who make a lot of money moved to Texas because all of them were being given like very favorable like tax rates, corporate income, everything, just across the board. Like the tax
Yeah,
is like
it
quite
doesn't
low.
have an income tax apparently.
Yeah.
Texas has a 6.2% state tax, sale tax, but yeah, that's it really.
Yeah, no state tax in Texas or Florida. So no state tax in Texas. So that's exactly what it is. Um, and this is also a good point. Texas has immigrant workers that can cross the border for work, so they don't even pay the workers well either. That's a good point too, which is why there's a lot of manufacturing going on there for that reason also. So it's a very, very, very interesting. Oh yeah, I would love to get Al on. Al wants to hop on as a Texas correspondent. Yeah, Al would be the perfect person to speak about this actually, because Al's from Houston, Texas. So I'd love to get his insight on all of this actually. But they heave. Oh my god! Quick side note. Dammy, you know the way property tax works in the US, right?
Yeah,
Bro, when I figured out how crazy property tax in the US is, I was like, damn. They tax you a percentage of the value of your house every year. It's not like
yeah,
in the UK where like once you buy the house you own it, and the only tax you pay is like council tax or whatever, which isn't that much money.
yeah.
So so
I
if
read a
you have an
story about a
expensive
woman.
house,
Yeah, go.
your property tax is like through the roof. I was like, damn,
Yeah,
that's expensive.
I read a story that a woman lost her house because she didn't pay $5,000. The house is worth 5 million.
Yeah. So like in the UK,
That's
someone
crazy.
could gift you a house and you could afford to keep it. But in the US, someone can gift you a house, but if you can't afford to pay like the property taxes, then you can't really keep it.
That's why it's so expensive to live in like New York and spaces like that.
Yeah.
Crazy work though.
But Al, you are muted, but would love to get your expert opinion on what's been going on in Texas and Texas manufacturing.
Yeah, I would say that the main thing. Sorry, I'm reporting on a bus, but the main thing that I would say is that Texas, in terms of manufacturing, we're really known for manufacturing like very few things. Like one of them is cars, as Sammy, like the Toyota Tundra is produced here, and year over year, like they keep seeing increase in sales. I think from 2014, they increased like 25%. So like it's a very a healthy market here, mostly because like here in Texas, the size of your vehicle is more of a sign of luxury than the make of your vehicle. Just like locally as like a cultural thing. Like it's not about
That's
getting
so
the
American, by
flashiest
the way.
engine or the fastest ride or the sportiest make. It's about having the biggest effing car you can possibly get. And the Toyota Tundra isn't like the highest range of that, which is like these giant King Ranch Ford F-150s. But but Toyota is like a heavily respected brand and does like I think over well Toyota in America does 2.6 billion in sales versus only 1.6 in Japan, right? So like they're bigger here in America and they do like over 100,000 units of sales in Toyota Tundras. Uh, just that model itself. It's not the most popular model all over America, but it's the most popular in Texas. It is something of status symbol to drive these big ass trucks, right? So there is a lot of pride in the fact that those are made here in Texas. And I would say the main thing that may have not been brought up on the stream yet is that the reason why you see a lot of pride in like I think auto manufacturing because historically that's a union industry, right? There is a bit of a social safety net that's built into like the industry there that isn't in like, you know, being a craftsman. The idea of like showing up to work as a craftsman, even starting at $17 an hour and maybe ending up at like $48 an hour in 10 years, like that's not something that appeals to people, because like if something were to happen and they lose their ability to work, that's it. There's no like 401k benefits that they're giving these people, right? So you're not going to get people who are American craftsmen who are interested in pursuing something where they have no ownership over the product, right? They can't, you know, there's definitely like this idea of showing up to the rodeo with your own like leatherworking and like a bit of ownership over your product that isn't necessarily a luxury focus, but sorry, there's an announcement going on a
No,
bus.
that's all right.
Currently on the way to Osaka.
You're
The
on vocal isolation, so we can't hear
Yeah,
it really.
the what was I saying? The
You were saying that they're unionized, which is a big reason why. Which is a good point to bring up, because in fashion, in let's say Italy and France, there are a lot of protections for workers. And in the clothing manufacturing space in the US, it seems like those protections aren't really there the same way, or to the same level at least, or to the same extent.
Well, in the early days, like let's take Walmart for instance, right? People were getting shares as part of a company, right? And on the other hand, in the well, where the car companies and car manufacturers move, there wasn't any stocks and shares for people that were, let's say, in our generation when we first started wanting to get jobs, right? Or people turning 18 from 2010. So the whole job market was in a collapse mode. I didn't want to use any slang terminology while I was on here, but it was in a shambles. We were, in a recession, going into a depression, especially in America, right? And
Yeah.
it wasn't the best place for the job market, and nobody was giving out ownership. And America has spoke about ownership for like centuries now, but at the same time, it's like, is ownership the only way people can take ownership of the type of work that they do in terms of how much they
Hmm.
value a craft? Because especially when we speak about the honorary crafts, right, like writing or videography, documentary making, all of these things, right, the things that don't necessarily pay the most money but have value in community and have value nationwide, people don't necessarily need to be owners of the company to be big writers.
Yeah. Yeah, I see that. But it's interesting though, because in the UK, as a journalist, you're not going to make a lot of money, but a lot of people still want to be journalists though. Like a lot of people want to write for BBC and like, have an impact in the way that media is shared and all that sort of stuff. So it's just a different like
Yeah,
reasoning for why they want to do the job in the first place. It's not like they don't go in it with the intention of I'm trying to be like rich or I'm trying to make like six figures or like that sort of stuff.
but yeah, we're talking about the American dream, and part of the American dream is greed. So, and I
Yeah.
know, the way that I post what I was saying earlier before was, but let's be like, I want to be 100% frank. Like
Mm,
the American, like the way that at least time has progressed and shown itself, greed has lived better, and the other seven deadly sins, right, than inherent love and value for the things that people make.
hmm.
Like just on a mass scale, like once a company scales to a certain point, they're not trying to give out stocks and shares to people.
Of course not. Is there like, why should we give anyone, even though you guys basically help build the company to where it is, but why
Yeah,
should we give you
and they will
a
liquidate those shares and make them fractional shares, so on and so forth.
The worst one is when, oh my God, the worst one is when they offer workers at the start an incentive by giving them like stock options. And then when the company, performs even better than a lot of these execs thought it could, they start diluting these people's shares to the point where they almost have no value. And it's like, so why did you give them stock options then if you're just going to make it have no value? Like, you should you should just not even offer them the stock options and like tease them in the first place. What's the point?
But yeah, like that notwithstanding though, I guess there's a myriad of reasons why, you know, Louis Vuitton had trouble, and they're not necessarily ingrained. No matter what, they're a foreign company,
Mm-hmm.
and the way that Americans treat foreign entities is definitely different than the way Americans treat homegrown businesses.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's why people are really berating Elon Musk right now. It's partially not just because of what he's done per se, but because he's just not an American.
Mm-hmm.
Like at any given moment, someone will bring up the fact that he's from South Africa. He's a foreigner. Like, and
Right.
that is literally who they're fighting against, foreigners. And Elon Musk's home nation is part of BRICS.
Yep.
So, like, let's not. And his family is wealthy, so they're gonna actually, what's the word again? They're gonna profit. They're gonna profit from what's happening with BRICS of nations, right? So, yeah, let's not get confused. Like, Elon Musk will still be all right, and his, whether his stock climbs or it falls or whatever it is, you know what I'm saying? It's all dependent on how people feel about him in that country. So when we start talking about Louis Vuitton now, I don't even know whether the average American has heard Bernard Arnault speak. So what type of
Probably,
pride?
definitely not. Actually, definitely not. Definitely not.
Yeah. Listen, I'm just hedging. I could have said it like that, but I didn't want to. But once they hear the French accent, Americans don't like the French for a lot of reasons, but especially in the older generation, one of the main reasons, and the French don't like Americans. Like it's not like this one way street,
Yeah, 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 I know.
but it's because the French waved the white flag in the war. Like that is the reason I get from most all Americans of a certain age. Like it's part and parcel of the way that people move here. So it's like I don't understand. No, it's not that I don't understand. It's that the value that Louis Vuitton has in America is way different than
To
whatever
right.
was the proposed thought process. Because I did not see an idea or spec or example of the fact that people would start caring about making Louis Vuitton bags in America so that a French company can profit.
From an American perspective, the Louis Vuitton bag is the exact same thing as an iPhone. It's a fancy luxury product designed in a like first world country and manufactured by like somebody that we pay as little as possible, right? There's not the connection. There's a total. What is the I think Marxian language that people use? There's a total alienation of the worker from the craft, right? That's how like luxury is built. Is that it's more about the brand than it is about like the craft itself.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and if people want craft, they do go to artisans. There is this culture here of like, oh, there are local leather workers and so on and so forth. You can get that if that's what you're into. But if you're into Louis Vuitton, you're not into it for the craft at all.
Yeah, I mean that's the case almost everywhere in terms of like people who are more, and especially if you can afford it, people who have actually care about the craft or more likely get their suits made at Savile Row. They're not gonna buy a super expensive like suit that costs like 7K off the rack, which some rich people do. But that comes down to like who cares about craft, who doesn't, and all this kind of conversations that we've had a lot earlier. Actually, you had long conversations about that. So yeah, interesting topic, interesting topic. The next topic I wanted to move on to is the decline of luxury sneakers. I saw this amazing article via BOF talking about the decline of luxury sneakers. I saw this as like something that is inevitable because I remember when luxury sneakers first became a thing that every brand decided that it made sense to do. And then slowly but surely we started to see like a downturn of, you know, the shoes and sneakers be going down. And it made me think of like, what were the first like luxury sneakers I ever saw? And I genuinely think these are probably the first luxury sneakers I ever saw, like these like Chanel sneakers. It was either these, the Margiela Futures, or the Balenciaga Arenas. It had to be like one of those. Those are like some of the first like sneakers I saw people wearing when I really started to get into fashion. So for people that don't know, these are the Margiela Futures. I actually really like these shoes. The more time progresses, the more I actually like these shoes, to be honest. It's so it's weird. But I like them more and more as time progresses. And I remember when they came out, I wasn't the biggest fan of them, but they've been growing on me slightly as time progresses. Um so those sneakers, and then also the Balenciaga Arenas, for people that don't know what those are. These are the Balenciaga. These were the OG like luxury sneaker. These are honestly the OG luxury sneaker. I still hate them, but these are the OG shoes that people
This
used
is
What
to
about the
wear.
Giuseppe
Prada
the
cups?
this is Giuseppe Danoli erasure right here.
Oh my god, the SLP Jordan 1s. I forgot about those. I totally forgot about those. That's crazy. There's like slim aesthetic. Do they still sell those shoes? Wait, let me see something.
Anyway, what
Saint
about Prada
Laurent.
cups? What about Prada cups?
Yeah, the Prada cups are also ones that
It's
were like
crazy.
early on or like part of that like sneakers. But I think when I think of you know, what sneaker then made the whole market explode, I definitely think it was the Balenciaga Triple S. I think before the Balenciaga Triple S, brands kind of had sneakers here and there, like we've
Yeah,
shown, but it wasn't really like a big focus for these brands. But once the Balenciaga Triple S exploded, and then companies started to see how much money they truly could make from a lot of these luxury sneakers, that's when all of them started going crazy. That I think that was when we saw the biggest hype we'll ever see in the luxury sneaker market. That was at around the same time we saw like the Gucci Ace sneakers. They had these ones. They had the ones with the flames that were also really really hyped. That I think was like the height of the whole
that
luxury
one.
sneaker market.
This one right here. Yeah, triple platinum. Triple platinum.
I think the whole nadir of this whole thing is when Xenia even released its own version of their Margiela Future, the Triple Cross.
Yeah.
Yeah, they made a low rip-off version of the Margiela Futures.
That's crazy.
Yeah, and all of them. I'm trying to find because the Saint Laurent images I'm seeing are these ones, but even these ones were like really, really crazy at one point. Like everyone had those Saint Laurent with the weird writing. That was like huge back in the
Mm.
day. Those were like really, really huge. And they had the high top ones. I can't find those. I remember these ones too with the stars. Um, so yeah, it was kind of like a thing, but there was never really that much hype around the sneakers until the Triple S, and then everyone, you know, started scrambling. And it's funny because on the BOF article, they have a really good graph showing the decline in US sneaker sales for designer brands from 2022 to 2024, and there's like a very huge dip when you look at 2022 compared to 2024, which is just 2 years. Massive dip. The industry has almost halved in sales.
I think we need to also look at the contrasting graph, and I do believe there will be a contrasting one of Crocs and Birkenstocks and their popularity.
Right. There was
Because
And
even a
loafers.
video.
Don't forget loafers.
Yeah, loafers are coming back. There was a video of how like how Crocs exploded that was run by I think like one of these like Financial Times or Bloomberg or something. So once it hits them, you know it's like a cultural phenomenon.
yeah, I think I watched that. I actually think I did watch that.
Y'all make me feel old. What were guys wearing when you were younger? What were the sneakers of choice? What were the luxury sneakers of choice when you were younger? I mean, I'm young, but not that young. I'm like Gen
To
Z,
bring
but like old Gen
to
Z.
bring back a talking point from earlier in the week, that was also a big revenue stream for Versace. They fell the fuck off.
If we're gonna talk about
That's
Versace,
true.
I think the absolute height and apex was the chain reactions for the sneakers. Salehi
That's
Bembury,
true.
when he made the chain reactions,
That's
made became a cultural
true.
phenomenon, and then he went to made Crocs.
I think the chain reactions are so ugly, but every rapper under the sun used to wear those.
Yeah,
Like
I
they
think
sold really, really well.
I think that was the height of it, where it's like, yo, sneaker designers it were coming to luxury brands the same way, like if they wanted to work at a luxury house, it will be like the same way people want to work at Nike, New Balance, or Adidas, right? And of course, like, nobody really wants to work at Nike anymore.
Right.
um Even though it does have great heritage and all of that type of stuff,
But
but
it's not the buzzy brand. People rather
yeah,
be a designer on running or,
literally.
it's New Balance or somewhere else.
Because yeah, you don't get to design anything new, like,
Yeah.
and that's kind of sad because Nike was the pinnacle of innovation at one point. You can't bring certain brands back, like, you just can't.
Yeah.
Hopefully Nike gets a run back though, to be fair.
Jennifer said, I'm so old when the whole concept of luxury sneakers was an incomprehensible oxymoron. So the funny thing, Jennifer, is like, even though obviously when I got into fashion, there were brands that had luxury sneakers like Chanel and like a few other brands. Valentino with the, oh my god, let me show this Valentino, the ones with the studs, the rock stud ones, like these ones, but not even just these ones, the other ones, like these ones were big, like the runners. Yeah, these ones, the Valentino runners. But beside that, when I first got into fashion, a conversation around fashion was like that fashion people used to have was you can't be fashionable if you wear sneakers because sneakers are too casual. It was almost like any sort of casual aesthetic is not fashionable in a way. It just looks like you woke up from the bed. That was kind of like the sentiment, the general sentiment when I first got into fashion. So this idea of athleisure being fashionable and being like a big category for luxury is unheard of because when I first got into fashion, those kind of people would never be seen wearing like a hoodie and like sneakers leaving their house. No way. They would never do that. So it's quite interesting how I think the growth and the hype of sneakers definitely coincided with people normalizing wearing like athleisure and sportswear as like a fashionable statement, especially in the realm of luxury fashion and high end fashion for sure.
Well, the route that we got there was, I think, through 2011's hyping of the white Air Force One as like the sort of key of the off-duty model look, right? So there was like a kind of a strange avenue we went through to get there. It wasn't through sneaker culture per se, but we did get there through, I think, specifically collaborations with Nike brand shoes and like the way that that was used already in the culture. And it was sort of
Yeah,
a inside baseball way that it kind of spiraled out of control.
yeah. Sneakers are the perfect errand shoe. I totally agree with you, by the way. I totally agree. Not someone saying sneakers belong in the gym. You guys are fighting to bring the old sentiment back. Any
Yeah,
sportswear and you're going to the gym. You cannot
I
be
don't
wearing that
I
fashionable.
don't understand how people dislike sneakers though, to be fair.
They're
And
comfortable.
trainers, in fact, let me even speak properly. Trainers.
They are
Trainers are
very comfortable. Why wouldn't you want to walk around in comfort?
Yeah, I like trainers. But I do love a great shoe and a great loafer. Like, I don't know, I can do both. Like, I've always loved kickers, I've always loved Clarks, I've always loved like Doc Martens, but I've
Yeah.
also always loved Nike and Adidas and Converse and Vans, to be fair. So yeah. What about you?
Yeah, I think I've always I mean, I've always worn sneakers because I was a basketball player, so kind of had to. But I was always, to be fair, I always was more of a running sneaker type of person because I wore sneakers for like sports, and then because I had
Mm.
so many sneakers from playing sports, I'll just use those casually or wear them for fashion too because it's comfortable. So if I knew I had to walk a lot, so a lot of shoes that I was into when I was younger were more like Nike Pegasus. Um, I'm trying to think of the other like running shoes that I used to be into, like the Ultra Glides, like all these kind of running shoes, the Spring Blades. You know, do you remember the Adidas Spring Blades? I was really into those, and then I remember Rick Owens, I think, had a collab with that. I was also used to wear a lot of the Y3 stuff because when I got into fashion, I was into
Yeah,
Yoji, and
and that's
so I
why
just used to wear a lot of like the Y3 collabs, like sneakers and stuff like that.
Y3 was what, like, yeah, that was a gateway. Y3 is like it's low key the black guy gateway into fashion. I can't lie, bro. Someone
Shout
get
out to Yoji. Yoji's a
trust
man of
me.
the people. That's why we all
Someone
gravitate
got
towards
into
Yoji.
into Y3 and just stayed there, fam. They just Y3 of Yogi's out.
That's true.
Y3 of
Some people did
Yogi's
get
out.
into Y3 and they're still there even till today.
This Y3 is great, so I don't even blame them, fam.
Oh my god, I got the first I'd say
Wow.
luxury shoe I ever bought was a pair of Kaza highs. I might actually have a picture. Let me see if I can find a picture of those. Literally the first luxury shoes I ever bought. Like what I spent, and I even got it on sale. And it wasn't because Kaza highs are not that expensive. They're still like an Adidas collab. But for me, that was like, oh my god, this is so expensive. Can't
Archive
believe I just
Y3.
spent that much on shoes.
No, Kazaha is crazy. I think Archive Y3s are gonna make a crazy comeback though.
I remember Kaza Highs had a little bit of a resurgence. I don't know if that resurgence is over, but there was a time when I saw Kaza Highs slowly making their way back, slowly creeping back into the ether of our conscience.
Yeah, no, Kazaha's were like my Y3 shoe, bro. Y3 shoe.
Do you
Shout
know
out
what's funny
to
about Kaza Highs? As iconic as they are, and as much as I love them, and I probably will buy another pair at some point, just out of nostalgia, they are terrible shoes to wear, by the way.
are they? I've never had
Like
them.
so they are comfortable, they're comfortable, but my first gripe is the sole wears out really quickly, which is really annoying. But
Mm,
apart from the sole wearing out, for some weird reason they don't have grip, so you slip everywhere. Every time I wore them I felt like I was about to fall down at any point in time because they just don't have any grip anywhere. It's
mm.
so odd. It's really strange.
Yeah, one thing when I looked at the sole of the Kazahas, because they've got that like ring, that bubble ring on the bottom, don't they? I
Yeah.
was like, these don't look very like basketball shoes, even though they are made from a basketball shoe. Like that's their foundation. So it's like, well, what's it called again? That's the mold that they use. The mold they use is a basketball shoe mold. So yeah.
That was an era of sneakers where Adidas used to wait for Y3 to do all the research and development, and then
Mm.
they would just like jack the designs. So I remember the Y3 Kaza High became I think the tubular runners or something like that.
Yes.
The
Yes.
Adidas tubular runners. And
Yes.
they used to do that constantly. Like they would just do that constantly. It's the same way that nowadays a lot of the like let's say Anthony Edwards sneakers and stuff is informed by the Yeezy stuff, right? So they would just let like Y3 or Yeezy do all the work and then just like jack the ideas and turn
Yeah.
those into GRs.
That's funny. It's not funny because that's someone's IP, but then again, it's their
I mean,
IP.
it's Adidas's IP, no?
It's their
Yeah.
yeah. Well, the Yeezy one and the Y3 one is a bit difficult to say because it just depends on whatever they negotiated. But in my head, it's like, oh wow, you're you're really taking designs. But to be fair, they wouldn't be the first sneaker company to
Yeah,
do that.
I mean that happens everywhere. I mean,
Literally,
Samuel Ross designed his Converses not that long
J.W.
later.
Anderson.
Yeah, JW Anderson, but JW Anderson, it didn't happen to one model; it happened to multiple models.
Yo, that was the worst case. I was like, oh, this is what's gonna happen.
Yeah, exactly. JW Anderson got mad at Converse. Yeah, because he's
Ooh,
like,
that was a big thing.
yeah, he posted about it on Instagram. I
Yeah.
remember at the time he literally posted on his official Instagram. So he was clearly frustrated about that, rightfully so. Even though you can see it from two perspectives. It's like at the end of the day, the contract is there and you know what you signed. But I also understand that as a designer, it could be so frustrating where because he was basically saying that they didn't make it clear what they would do with his designs because what they did was they just stopped producing his and only produced like the big release to make sure that they didn't have to pay him money. So instead of like creating both, and obviously the general release version is going to sell more anyway, because how many people know who JW Anderson
Mm.
is, like compared to like the Converse consumer, right? But they just completely ceased to produce his collab and just did the GR and completely cut him out of it entirely, which was crazy. It was really, really crazy.
That was a different time, man. That's almost 10 years ago.
Yeah.
Golly. Golly, it's almost been 10 years.
Jennifer says you're gonna lose the woman in the
Yeah,
chat.
sorry about that. I thought we were
talking
talking about
about
shoes.
talking about sneakers. We're just talking about the death of the sneaker, the sneaker market and why that happened and all that sort of stuff. Women wear sneakers too. I'm sure the ladies in the chat
Yeah, them
um
Chanel shoes are like, or them
have
Chanel collab.
indulged in a sneaker or two, especially
I
the
But
Chanel
don't you
sneakers.
remember when all the fashion girls were wearing like those Chanel shoes and the Alexander McQueens with the mum jeans? Because
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
I
yeah, yeah.
remember when mum jeans and those things like they had a cross pollination, and then they switched to Air Forces. But I still remember that, and Air Maxes. But I remember that. I remember that.
Yeah.
And then the Hood brothers, they the urban guys and the urban the urban guys and the what's it called, the toffs, they switched. So the toffs started wearing Air Force Ones, and the urban guys started wearing Alexander McQueens. That was a time, man. What a time to be alive.
Yeah.
What a time to be alive.
It definitely was. Let me see what they're saying in the BRF article. They said last week Louis Vuitton unveiled the Sneakerina, a new silhouette that plays into the trend of sneakers inspired by ballet flats. Oh my god, I'm tired of that. While D Squared released the Sprinter, a $520 take on retro running shoes, both arrived shortly after Marni revealed a road running sneaker with Hoka, and Balenciaga sent its distressed take on the Puma Speed Cat sneaker down the Paris Fashion Week runway. We kind of looked at the Speed Cat in my runway review of the Balenciaga show. That was the last Balenciaga show that Demna did. It's also weird when you look at like luxury sneakers as a category, because obviously it is a cash grab for a lot of these brands. But it started to become fascinating also how frequently they started to release these sneakers. It used to be once every sort of while, whereas now every single runway show they have a new iteration of a luxury sneaker that they're trying to push, which was a big difference compared to how it first started.
Yeah, do you know what's interesting though? Like the new Louis Vuitton sneaker, which is $800 by the way, 749 I believe, or 779.
Really, I don't know how much it costs. Let me
I've
put it
seen
up on the
people, I've
screen.
seen people like it. It looks like looks like a
It looks
spike
like
sneaker.
Onitsuka Tiger.
Yeah, it looks. Yes, I'm trying to figure out. Like, I believe they got like golfing shoes.
Yeah,
These shoes
to me they
are
just
like
look
a golfing
like
shoe shape.
overpriced Onitsuka Tiger. I also think that LV with the monogram is so tacky, but that's just personal opinion, of course,
There is
personal
other
taste.
colorways though.
There
If
must
we're
be.
gonna be fair, if we're gonna be fair,
Let's see the
I've
sneaker
seen
arena.
like the shape. I've seen people like the shape.
The thing
LVs.
is, though, I would rather buy Onitsuka Tigers than those.
You know what? I don't even have Onitsuka Tigers, and that's actually kind of bad of me. I should get some.
They're trending. I think they started trending when the whole like bloke core thing came and people were wearing low top
Mm,
sneakers, the Nitsuka Tigers, the Sambas, the Margiela
yeah,
Gats. They're kind of in that realm.
there's also these ones as well. I sent
Yeah,
them
let
to
me look
you in
those
the
up.
back channel.
Oh yeah, these are the ones that Pharrell put on the runway in that show that was about that
Hmm.
had all the different flags and stuff. Yeah, I remember. It's kind of like the AstroTurf that they were trying to
Because I
push.
think these have dropped on
Yeah.
thingy. Can you buy these now?
They look like Diodoras. Like, like Umbro shoes from like the early
Oh,
2000s.
yeah, 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 yeah,
That's
yeah,
what they
yeah,
look
yeah,
like.
yeah.
And just instead of Umbro on the side, they put LV. It's probably the same font
What
as
a
Umbro.
pull! What a pull! That's
It looks like the
hilarious.
same. It looks like the same font as Umbro. You know what? Let me pull up some Umbro Ashtetas actually.
Because the quilting, is it called quilting? The padding on the upper, it looks
Yeah,
actually like
even
that as
even the
well. Yeah,
shape looks exactly the same. Also, it's like they
think
didn't even try for that.
yeah. Copy my homework, but don't make it look obvious.
They did not even attempt to try with that one. Like I was like, first time I saw them, I was like, those are Umbros. Those are just Louis Vuitton Umbros. Like literally Umbros.
Or yeah, I think they're called the S Eternals or the
What, the Louis
Topaz.
Vuitton version?
The Umbros.
Okay,
I
send me a
think that.
link and I'll put it on the screen.
All right, give me a share.
But yeah, so yeah, these sneakerinas, I'm not too sure about that. Also, the sole, that sole is atrocious. A lot of shoes that have these kind of soles, they wear out really easily, and then before you know it, the sole of your foot is rubbing against the street. These colorways also. I kind of like this pink colorway though. It's kind of cool.
Mm.
Kind of. I just don't like this silhouette, but the pink colorway, this sort of pink color, is probably one of the better
Oh, so
colorways.
yeah, these are the same shape actually. I just looked.
Good lord, what's the name? Yeah, they're like ballerina sneakers, sneakerina. I wonder who came up with that idea. They must have thought they came up with a bright idea. Like, yeah, sneakers and ballet shoes, sneakerinas.
You know what? I think you are low key spot on with that.
LV sneakers, I
Umbros.
haven't tried them before. I couldn't imagine they'd be comfy. Yeah, I probably don't think they're comfy. Also, good point by the way. How is a cobbler supposed to repair this? The answer is they can't. And they're not supposed to repair it. You're supposed to buy a new one. That's probably what they would tell you.
Okay, I've
Supposed to
got the
buy a
name of
new
the
one.
shoes. I've got the name of the Umbros that you were talking about.
Oh, you mean in terms of the ones that Louis Vuitton
Yeah.
essentially copied?
Google those ones, please.
Okay, I'll whip these up on the screen right now.
Tell me if that's the one you're thinking
But
about.
with the same padding. I mean, I definitely own these boots. I think my first football boots were these exact ones. Um, but yes, it's the same like design and shape and sentiment that Louis Vuitton
Same
use. Like
quoting.
they literally even the back is the same. Yeah, they just copied the the Umbro design and just put Louis Vuitton on it. And it's like, why would you? Because first of all, the people that wear AstroTurfs are people that play football or people that are football adjacent, like people that live in a country where football is played a lot. And even if you don't play football regularly, you might be called upon in your AstroTurfs to kick a few
Called
balls.
upon in the actual terms is
And if
crazy.
you're wearing LV Astros, well, you're not going to want to be called upon. So I don't see anyone really buying them, though. Like, why would you buy those when Nike is bringing back the Total 90? It's just a lack of understanding of the market. Like, Nike is bringing back the Total 90s and that whole nostalgia, and more people are focusing on that. So yeah, it just doesn't really make that much sense, to be honest. Shoe ideas for Balenciaga 2 buckets. Also, yeah, the Margiela Louboutin. I was so sad about that collaboration because I expected that collaboration to be so much, but I don't know what I was expecting. But the collection was really disappointing. I was really disappointed by the Margiela Louboutin collaboration. I expected so much more from that collaboration, honestly. I really, really did. Bedazzled camel toes. I know, right? Let me show you guys what they had. The pumps. I mean, they're neither here nor there. I don't really have too much of an issue with the pumps. There's just people wanting red bottoms. The Lubiella, these names that they come up with. But this is kind of cool. The kind of sort of deconstructed sort of boots. That's a very like Margiela-esque thing. And of course, having the red bottoms for Louboutin. The thing about Louboutin is like, all you need to do to make it Louboutin is to have a red bottom. So they could have made any silhouette. It didn't have to like do some of the weird stuff that they did with a lot of the shoes. So yeah, I just think I don't know. I just expected way more from the collaboration than what they provided. But going back to the BOF article, as I've told you guys, the sales of sneakers are down 37% versus 2022, which is actually insane. Of course, sneaker culture and sneakers are still selling, but it's just not as much as they once did before. To quote a quote via BOF, it says, a couple of years ago, every big brand had an it sneaker that drove a massive business. In recent years, it has become less apparent. They're talking about in the past, and there was sort of a renaissance of luxury sneakers in the 2010s with the likes of the Balenciaga Triple S, the McQueen oversized sneaker, the Louis Vuitton trainers that generated loads and loads of money. But nowadays, we're kind of seeing these collaborations not working, and I think it's because the collaborations are less inspired, they're less thought through, kind of what we showed with the Louboutin Margiela collab. It seems to be the case that there isn't a lot of thought going into these collaborations. They're very much a cash grab. We've extensively covered a lot of the collaborations that, let's say, Balenciaga has done with a lot of sportswear companies, whether that's Puma or all these other companies, and there isn't much thought that goes into those collabs, versus maybe collaborations that they did with sportswear companies in the past. So I think it all shows, and I think that's why we're seeing a decline in luxury sneakers, other than also us, just being jaded and fashion going back to more formal looks, to quite luxury, people wearing ballet flats and loafers and that sort of stuff. So things are just trending away from sneakers in general, and it's more to the sentiment of kind of when I first got into fashion and the way people used to talk about sneakers, which was very much sneakers are casual and for sports, and real shoes are what you wear outside. And that's what you wear when you want to look more respectable, if that makes sense. But I think it's just the cash grabby, uninspired nature of a lot of the collabs, and also how many collabs they used to have. It got to a point, it felt like there was a collaboration every 5 minutes. Obviously, I'm exaggerating, but you know what I mean. And because every time I exaggerate, there are always people in the comments like, well, actually, it was not 5 minutes. They actually happened approximately every 2 months. And it's like, do people not know what an exaggeration is? But anyway, there was just a collaboration all the time. So it started to be ridiculous. It started to get out of hand, to be honest. Lots of these collaborations are definitely cash grabs. Holy, the Christian Louboutin collaboration is definitely one not as artistic as the runway shoes. Damn. I'm not too sure about that use of the A word. But I see what you're saying. The girls don't understand hyperbole. It seems so. It seems so. But yeah, the bubble, as for me, is saying the bubble has surely and definitely burst when it comes to the whole luxury sneaker market and scene as a whole, to be honest. And so, yeah, as that being said, guys, we shall now go into after hours. If you guys want to talk about anything, I think today is I'm still feeling good. An hour and 46 minutes in, so we can go into after hours. We can talk about anything of your choosing. If you want me to talk about that, let me know, and we can go into after hours and talk about whatever you guys want to talk about. And I feel like I haven't done a dedicated after hours in a while, actually. So we can hop into that today. You can hop into that today. Let me just sort some of the stuff out. I just made sure I had a timestamp. Luke, why are you so messy? Drag someone for after hours. Why so messy? I feel like we've beaten that into a dead horse, the whole, politics and the economy. So I'm going to refrain from that. Also because I'm probably going to end up talking about politics and the economy more because Trump does something every 5 minutes. So yeah. Talk about how there's 1,000 jobs for sales assistants and none for production in first world countries. I mean, we kind of answered that earlier. It's because no one wants to do grueling work for low pay, back-breaking work for low pay, especially if you have the option not to, which in first world countries, people have options, especially more options than people in developing countries. So yeah, that's the answer to that. How do you feel about the known football terrorist Mohamed Salah re-signing a contract with the evil organization of UFC? That's crazy. Mohamed is not a terrorist. Because he scores goals against your beloved team does not make him a terrorist. But I don't know. I feel like Mohamed Salah is going to stay in Liverpool for the rest of his career. I just think that's kind of the vibe I'm getting from Mo Salah, to be honest. Let's see. The latest Customary for podcast with Noah saying he's not. Oh, actually, Imani, that's a spicy one. You know what? Let me whip that. I saw that on TikTok. Let me whip that up on the screen quickly. That's actually like a very interesting thing to talk about. Let me bring that up 1 second. Shout out to Rachel Amondi, by the way. Absolutely love her podcast. Sensational podcast. But let me. I need to bring that because that was funny. That whole I'm not streetwear was hilarious. Oh my god, why can't I find it on Rachel Amondi's page? No. No. Okay, I found it. I was hoping she didn't delete it. I was like, no. No, Rachel. Okay, so this is it. This is the clip. So I'll play the clip and then I'll give my thoughts after. So let me just play the clip for you guys.
Supreme, you said even back then, James Jebbia was like king of the universe. Supreme started in 94. You got there in 96. You said that was an Outcast brand in the beginning.
I mean, I don't know about Outcast, but like what James had done, the original crew that worked with him, like Gio and the guys at the shop, they were addressing a need for New York skateboarders. Those guys were New York skateboarders. The Ryan Hickeys of the world and the Jeff Pangs and all these guys and they would...
Should I know those people?
Some of your listeners will. If they know me, they'll be like, oh yeah, we know who that is.
Okay.
California was a different universe, skateboarding wise. There was still this heavy influence from like the surf world and like the graphics might be a little bit surfier or like might be wearing a pink t-shirt or like Quicksilver shorts or whatever. And it was just a different thing. And I think one of the greatest things about Supreme was it became the center of the universe for people from New York, which had a different skate culture. It wasn't so clean and safe here in New York. You weren't skating along the beach. You're in like these really shitty locations and there's like homeless people and winos and broken bottles in the gutter and da-da-da. And like that's where you're skating. So the New York kids were just a different thing altogether.
I want to talk about Supreme. You said even back then, James Jebbia was like king of the universe. Supreme started in 94. You got there in 90.
And just pause that. That's not even the clip. I thought that was the clip. Let me actually find the clip. 1 second. I need to find this clip. 1 second, because that clip was spicy.
What I find interesting today, the recreations that surround streetwear, whereas they used to be like basketball, surfing, skating, they now feel much more polished. It's like sailing, it's tennis, it's après ski. Yeah, I mean, I'm surprised you're saying is it, because it's very much Noah.
Yeah, but Noah's not a streetwear brand.
It's not.
I know you say it is.
Yeah, so let me give context before you watch the clip, just so that you guys have context of like Noah and like all this stuff. So Noah is a streetwear brand. I don't care what he says. And his background comes from the likes of Supreme and stuff. And when he created Noah, it was kind of off the back of the hype of streetwear. It was at the height of streetwear. When you look at the products that Noah makes, it is very much in the realm of like what you would associate with skaters, which is kind of like where his design background comes from, right? It's kind of, like flannels, tops, caps, sweaters, polos, hoodies, like loafers and stuff like that, boat shoes. It's very like the same kind of stuff that it's the same kind of products that I'm trying to think of like a good similarity. Like Denim Tears would make, or like even Stussy would make, or those kind of brands. They kind of make kind of similar products basically. And to say that it's streetwear is not necessarily reducing it in any way, which is the way he said it's not streetwear was giving some racial undertones that was a bit strange. I don't know if he realized that's how he came across, but that is how he came across. He's almost like shitting on streetwear when he made so much money off the back of streetwear, and off the cultures that expanded from streetwear, like hip hop culture, skatewear, hip hop music, that sort of stuff. So it's a bit crazy for him to deny streetwear in the way that he was doing, and also for him to deny that the idea of what streetwear is has changed and into these more like polished segments in fashion, like sailing and tennis. You see a lot of what's that brand? Sporty and Rich making these sort of streetwear like tennis luxe collections and stuff. That he knows that happens, unless he's like just trying to be obtuse. He knows that that's the case.
I've heard you say it a few times already, but like I would never call it a street, not in a million years.
Really? That's interesting.
Well, you got to remember, I didn't call streetwear when they started calling it streetwear.
Right, but
nothing I ever touched ever was streetwear to me.
Okay, sure, but we also have to like level set. You came from Supreme, which is like the holy grail of streetwear.
Yeah, but I had a life before that too, right? That was where I grew up. The foundation was preppy. And then we layered in our like interest in music and punk rock and hip hop on top of that.
Right. But when you launched Noah in 2015,
it wasn't a streetwear brand.
But I'm telling you, when you came out on the scene, whatever, with Noah in 2015, all of the press around it, all the language around it was like Supreme veteran Brandon Bemizine.
That's not my
Supreme,
fault.
But I mean,
that's the media's fault. I didn't ask.
But that's how they packaged it. It was like his alma mater is Supreme.
But does that make it right?
But it's accurate.
He's saying that's how they packaged it, but that's your track record, though. How else are they supposed to promote you if not by using your track record and what you're famous for? How else are they supposed to brand you or market you? Like that's a bit crazy.
But I mean,
that's the media's fault. I didn't ask.
But that's how they packaged it. It was like his alma mater is Supreme.
But does that make it right?
But it's accurate.
No, it's not.
What do you mean? You spent 14, 15 years at this company.
They were saying where I was from, sure. But saying Noah was a streetwear brand was absurd.
I always thought that
I was making cashmere shirts and Shetland sweaters.
Cashmere shirts and Shetland sweaters can still be streetwear. Especially because, let me show you guys the Noah campaigns. Because this guy, I think he wants to be in denial. That's fine. But like when you look at the Noah campaigns, let me just show you guys the Noah campaigns. They very much look like he had skaters wearing his stuff and like all this sort of stuff. Like, it's very much how Stussy does campaigns. It's very much how the campaigns look exactly the same as like Palace campaigns, to be honest. So to try and reject that and be like, because my sweaters were cashmere, is a bit nonsensical, to be honest. It's extremely nonsensical. He's like, I'm Laura Piano because I was making cashmere, like H&M makes cashmere sweaters. Uniqlo makes cashmere sweaters. But anyway, let's see what else he has to say.
Years at this company.
They were saying where I was from, sure, but saying Noah was a streetwear brand was absurd.
I always thought that
I
there
was
was
making cashmere shirts and Shetland sweaters.
Okay.
Seriously.
Yeah.
Like, that's what I was making. Yeah, like nautical stuff and beach stuff. And like, does that sound like streetwear to you? Like, maybe
No.
today, possibly. But like, so I had no control over what people said. I still don't. Now they just put me in the preppy category. They're like, oh, everybody, Ame Leandore, Noah, rowing blazers, they're all preppy. And it's like, well, yeah, a little bit, but we're also not entirely that either. The media doesn't know what to do. They need to package them.
So Aimee Leandore is more preppy than Noah, though. The thing about this stuff is it's how you brand. It's like, who wears your brand? Who do you send it to? What are the campaigns? What do your stores look like? What are your garments put next to? Like, if you look at the Noah section in DSM, Noah is beside other streetwear brands like Palace and Supreme and stuff in DSM London. So in most stores, Noah is put beside like the streetwear brands. So it's like association. When you look at Aimee Leandore, you look at their store, there's a cafe, there's jazz music playing in the stores, everyone's wearing loafers with white socks. So people are going to think of Aimee Leandore as more like preppy and think of Noah as more like streetwear. How do people not understand this? It's so like, this is literally like marketing and branding 101.
Things. They need to sell you information and like put it into the world. Nuance.
Okay, this is new to me.
Nuance and complexity is not part of our culture anymore. Everything has to be easy and quantifiable and simple to understand. When I did my thing, because I was at Supreme, they were like, well, I guess it's streetwear. Once we were labeled that, it's never gone.
They didn't say, well, I guess it's oh my God. One of the main tenets of streetwear is skating. Supreme is a skatewear brand. Supreme is a skateboarding brand. How can you say that, I guess they labeled Supreme as streetwear? That doesn't make any sense. It's literally a skatewear brand. Oh my God. Oh my God. Let me Google the definition of streetwear. 1 second. That doesn't even make any sense. 1 second. That makes no sense. Oh my God. The definition of streetwear is a casual, youth-oriented fashion style with roots in urban culture, particularly hip-hop, surfing, and skateboarding, characterized by comfortable, often oversized clothing and a focus on sneakers, hoodies, and graphic tees. So if a brand's whole focus is skateboarding, how could you possibly claim that, well, you know, they branded us as streetwear? What? That doesn't even make any sense. That doesn't make any sense. No, I need to play that again because that literally does not make any sense.
Nuance.
Okay, this is new to me.
Nuance and complexity is not part of our culture anymore. Everything has to be easy and quantifiable and simple to understand. When I did my thing, because I was at Supreme, they were like, well, I guess it's streetwear. Once we were labeled that, it's never gone away. You called Noah streetwear 25 minutes ago. And I don't even push back anymore. I'm like, whatever. It doesn't even matter what people call things anymore. But it never really was.
This is why it's important for a lot of designers to have like branding people on their team or like marketing people that can tell them why people see their brand a certain way and like what the associations are. Because to say that, oh, you know, because of Supreme, it was labeled as streetwear. It's like Supreme is a skating brand. That's what Supreme is. Like, do people not know, especially if you've been at Supreme that long, surely you should know that. How do you not know that? No, I need to watch this again. The clip was, even though I've watched this already, but just listening to it again,
the recreations.
Like, damn. And let me watch this again one more time.
What I find interesting today, the recreations that surround streetwear, whereas they used to be like basketball, surfing, skating, they now feel much more polished. It's like sailing, it's tennis, it's après ski. Yeah, I mean, I'm surprised you're saying is it, because it's very much Noah.
Yeah, but Noah's not a streetwear brand.
It's not.
I know you say it is. I've heard you say it a few times already, but like,
well,
I would never call it a street, not in a million years.
Really? That's interesting.
Well, you got to remember, I didn't call streetwear when they started calling it streetwear.
Right, but you came from...
Nothing I ever touched ever was streetwear to me.
Okay, sure, but we also have to like levels that you came from Supreme, which is like the holy grail of streetwear.
Yeah, but I had a life before that too, right? That was where I grew up. The foundation was preppy. And then we layered in our like interest in music and punk rock and hip hop on top of that.
Right, but when you launched Noah in 2015,
it wasn't a streetwear brand.
But I'm telling you, when you came out on the scene, whatever, with Noah in 2015, all of the press around it, all the language around it was like Supreme veteran Brandon Bemzine.
That's not my
Supreme,
fault.
But I mean,
that's the media's fault. I didn't ask.
But that's how they packaged it. It was like
know,
he came from his alma mater is Supreme.
But does that make it right?
But it's accurate.
No, it's not.
What do you mean? You spent 14, 15 years at this company.
They were saying where I was from, sure. But saying Noah was a streetwear brand was absurd.
I always thought that
I was making cashmere shirts and Shetland sweaters.
Okay.
Seriously.
Yeah.
Like, that's what I was making. Yeah, like nautical stuff and beach stuff. And like, does that sound like streetwear to you? Like, maybe today, possibly, but like.
Nautical stuff and beach stuff is streetwear because surfing is also something that's associated with streetwear. So when you think of streetwear, you think of surfing, skateboarding, hip hop, and sports. Those are like, and skateboarding, surfing, hip hop, and sports. Those are like the main aspects of streetwear. So like sports, so talking about culture that comes from like basketball mainly and stuff like that. So to say that I was making nautical stuff, does that sound like streetwear to you? I'm quite surprised that someone that has been at Supreme doesn't even understand what streetwear is. He seems to not even know what streetwear is, which is why I don't think he even knows what he's trying to deny about saying that Noah isn't streetwear. It's almost like he doesn't know what streetwear is, actually. That's the vibe I'm getting from him, to be very honest with you. Also, let me read the comments. There's definitely a racial undertone to his idea of streetwear, as well as his desire to distance himself from it. 100% true. Damn, people in this chat are harsh. Someone said, why do I hate him? Someone said, imagine working for him. Someone is saying Noah is a subversive preppy brand. The question is, subversive with what? I don't get why he finds it so difficult to honor the roots of streetwear and says hip hop under his breath as though there might be hip hop culture and fashion surrounding it had not captured the world by storm in the last decades. Let's read on. Then define it. What is it if not streetwear? He's so weirdly defensive. He comes as very unlikable. Mind you, his wife / co-founder is a black woman. Damn. Oh my gosh, they're cooking. They are going ham. They are going ham. They are actually going ham. They're really, really going ham. That's crazy. That's crazy. He's definitely feeling against the term streetwear because of racial connotations. But anyway, yeah, those are my... Shout out to Amani who brought this up. Those are my thoughts on the whole like Noah thing. I don't really know him, so I don't necessarily have anything against him or whatever. And I've always thought that Noah was a cool brand. That's not going to change. But I think he's mistaken by the like what his brand represents and what people see his brand at and what market segment his brand sits in. Because you normally sit in a market segment in which like where you're placed in the store matters. So if you don't want to be seen as streetwear, you shouldn't allow stores to put your t-shirts with graphics and stuff right beside other brands that are so closely tied to streetwear like Palace and Supreme. That's just like common sense. So kind of rejecting that and acting like that isn't the case, I think is slightly obtuse. But like I said, I don't really know him, so I don't really have anything against him personally. I don't like have any issues with him or whatever. I'm sure he's a cool guy, but I don't think he came across well in that interview with Rachel Amondi for sure. I don't think he really came across too favorably. Nautical and surfing are not the same at all. Completely different style. I don't understand how someone can mix the two. Yeah, but when he says nautical, he's kind of talking about more of like a streetwear surfing nautical look. Like when people say nautical, they don't mean like sailor hats and stuff like that. Like Noah doesn't do a lot of sailor hats and stuff, but they definitely do the like beach vibe shirts and stuff like that. T-shirts with beachy prints. Like that's because you do like one pair of boat shoes does not mean that your whole brand is now nautical. Nothing from Noah looks streetwear. If Noah is streetwear, then Tommy Hill. But Tommy Hilfiger, a lot of it is streetwear. A lot of Tommy Hilfiger is streetwear, though. And I think Tommy Hilfiger actually leaned into it. Of course, Tommy Hilfiger does so many other things. Tommy Hilfiger also has so many different lines. But I think that Tommy is very streetwear, so I don't know. Like Tommy's quite streetwear. Um, that is very streetwear, if you ask me. To be honest, I think Tommy is very streetwear. So I think you answered your own question, without meaning to. But anyway, any more questions? Any more questions, guys? Any more questions? Any more questions? Any more stuff that you want me to cover for after hours? We're talking about designers in the chat. Who are you talking about? Yeah, exactly. Tommy has been worn together. The Echo, Fubu, Tim's. Facts. We want to talk about the influence of designers relative. I feel like we have that conversation all the time, no? I feel like we do. He shouldn't have gone on that podcast. The thing is, though, Rachel Omondi, I'm a big fan of hers. She's not the kind of interviewer that's trying to catch you out or is trying to have a gotcha moment. She's not really that kind of person. She asks pressing questions. She doesn't just like let interviewers get away with like giving a PR response. She will dig further, but I think he just didn't, or maybe he wasn't prepared to talk about those, or he didn't have a strong enough answer to answer those kind of questions. So I think he still could have gone on the show. I just think he just wasn't prepared, maybe. Yeah, she's very honest. That's very true. Very, very honest, which is just what any good interviewer will do, right? They're not gonna let you get away with saying some arbitrary, random stuff that doesn't really mean anything. They're going to keep pushing to get an answer. Let's see what you guys are saying. Tuba Avalon's new video. I thought it was interesting how she said the road doesn't realize that Uniqlo might be their biggest competition. I haven't actually seen that video. It's I'm going to watch it soon because it's in my watch later playlist. So I'm definitely going to watch it soon. But okay, that's interesting. I didn't know what point she made in the video, obviously, because I haven't watched it. But that's interesting. I don't think the Row and Uniqlo are in competition though, but we can talk about that later. Because their price points are so completely different. I don't think the kind of person that buys the Row would ever interchange the Row for Uniqlo. And I think that the person that buys the Row probably buys Uniqlo as well, in terms of the fact that the person that buys the Row will probably buy their basics from Uniqlo and then buy statement pieces from the Row. But that's interesting. Yeah? And this is very true. Rachel will continue to press for an authentic answer. Very true. Very, very true. You guys want to talk about the Row versus Uniqlo? That's funny. I can see Phoebe as being arguably the most influential. Yes, because influential would mean that she influences the most people. I don't know. I think Phoebe is definitely one of the names. I think there are many different names that you can put in the hat in terms of influential designers. So I'm thinking of Martin Margiela. I think Martin Margiela has inspired so many designers at this point. It's actually quite tiring how many designers like copy his work or are inspired heavily by his work. Martin Margiela is there. Phoebe Philo, I mean, what do they call them? The rodents? The people that all have that the row aesthetic, Phoebe Philo aesthetic, all of that comes from Phoebe Philo. So Phoebe is definitely there. Martin Margiela is definitely there. I'm trying to think of another designer that's just like heavily copied or referenced, or a lot of designers are influenced by their work. Those are the two main ones that come to mind, to be fair. Like Margiela and Phoebe Philo for sure. Those are like the two main ones. Virgil Abloh is definitely another name. Someone said Virgil Abloh. That's true. That's very true. So Virgil Abloh, Phoebe Philo, Martel Margiela. Who else? Phoebe Philo, Martel Margiela, Virgil Abloh. I'm trying to think. Who do you guys think in the chat? I'm curious. Okay, Jonathan Anderson, I'm not too sure about that. Demna, yes, because Demna has spawned all these like streetwear brands and Instagram brands where they have all this like crazy oversized aesthetics. Even Justin Bieber's brand is kind of like an offshoot of Demna's work, which is quite funny. So Demna, I can definitely say. I'm not sure about JW Anderson though. Love JW Anderson, but I don't think his work. I don't see that many designers copying his work, basically. And yeah, shout out to Rachel Tastian Seville who came up with the rodents phrase. I love that phrase so much. The rodents. Yeah, Justin Bieber does have a brand. He does. Spawned is a loaded word. Okay, Jennifer, I definitely see where you're going with this, with Vivienne Westwood, for sure. I can see that. Because there's so many, less so now, but in the 2010s, so many designers were like, we're inspired by punk. There were so many designers like that, like the Yang Lees and like those kind of brands. All of them were Vivienne Westwood inspired, and a lot of them were London based too. So I definitely can agree with that. Vivienne Westwood for sure. For sure. Everyone wanted to be punk. Ray Kawakubo, who is that? If you mean Ray Kawakubo, I don't know about influential. I think that Ray Kawakubo is influential in the fact that she's just such an amazing designer, and she's influential historically. But not that many people copy Comme des Garçons, because you probably can't, because a lot of Comme des Garçons is not really wearable, especially if we're talking about mainline. So I wouldn't really say that Ray Kawakubo's aesthetic is copied, and even designers who, have been trained by her or come under the Comme des Garçons umbrella, like Junya Watanabe, they've learnt under Junya Watanabe and stuff like that. I would say that if you look at Junya Watanabe's work, like mainline, and then Comme des Garçons mainline, they're very different. Kei Ninomiya's mainline is also very different. So all these designers don't really have an aesthetic that's similar. Or like Chitose Abe, that came from that Comme des Garçons school of thought. Her work is more like military inspired. It's more like, it's not close to what Ray Kawakubo does at Comme des Garçons either. So she's influential in the sense that she's trained so many designers that have gone on to do legendary things. But not that many people copy Comme des Garçons, to be honest. Unless maybe you want to make the argument of a lot of designers doing that whole like raw, unfinished hem thing, which a lot of designers do. Maybe they get that from Comme des Garçons, but there's also many other people they might get that from, like Yoji Yamamoto or Martel Margiela. So I think it depends how you see it. I think Ray has definitely helped to create that fashion is unwearable art movement that has infected fashion schools. Okay, in terms of fashion students, yes. If you're talking about fashion students, I totally agree with you. I was more thinking in terms of like brands that are prominent, how many of them like copy Rei Kawakubo's work. But yeah, on that note, guys, my camera battery is actually about to die, so I might as well just end the stream here before it just abruptly ends. If you want to continue the conversation, we can continue via Discord. But this was really fun. And I'll see you guys hopefully in tomorrow's stream. But thank you very much, guys, for tuning in. Let me just end this before my camera battery dies. All right.